Let me start by acknowledging Your Excellencies, the representative of the UNDP, that is the resident rep. Thank you, my brother, for your key participation in this conference. Our development partners, and I want to single out the Japanese Embassy, the Charge d'Affaires is here. Thank you very much. Officials from the global rating agencies, colleagues from government, ladies and gentlemen. Let me, from the outset, express, on behalf of the government of Kenya, our sincere appreciation to UNDP, the government of Japan, Africatalysts, African Peer Review Mechanism, and all our esteemed partners for their unwavering commitment to this important agenda. Our presence here today reflects a shared belief, which is that Kenya's future prosperity depends on our ability to access financing that is both affordable and transformative. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya is a highly diverse economy and continues to enjoy a stable macroeconomic environment that is supportive of growth. And I want to just single out that in the second quarter of 2025, our economy grew or recorded a growth of 5% from an average of 4.9% recorded in 2024. And this is against earlier projection that we would record a lower than 5% growth in this calendar year. And it's projected at 5.3% by end of 2025 and 2026. Inflation rate, as Honorable Muraidhi has spoken about, has eased from an average of 4.3% in July 2024 to 4.1% in July 2025, and now is at 4.6% in September, largely driven by the seasonal changes in vegetable prices. And as a result of this is as a result of tightened monetary policy and also significant declines in energy prices and continued easing of food prices. We'll again engage in a conversation whether it is still relevant to work with the non-core inflation, or we should focus on core inflation when we are coming up with monetary policies to manage inflation. CBK has gradually eased monetary policy by lowering the CBR rate from 13% in July 2024 to 9.5% in August 2025. In the financial year 2025-2026, revenues are projected at 3.321 trillion, which is 17.2% of GDP. Of this, ordinary revenue is projected at 2.754 trillion, which is 14.3% of GDP. Expenditures are also projected at 4.269 trillion, which is 22.2% of GDP. And we are projecting a fiscal deficit of 901 billion, that is 4.7% of GDP. By end of June, public debt stock stood at 11.7 trillion shillings, which is 67% of GDP in nominal terms, comprising of 46.1% external debt and 53.9% domestic debt. Public debt to GDP ratio is projected to decline to the debt anchor of 55 plus or minus 5% of GDP in present value terms by 2030, supported by our medium-term fiscal consolidation efforts. I know in law it is 2028, but we are being more realistic on the time that we are likely to achieve the debt anchor. Growth in private sector credits from the banking system has continued to improve and stood at 3.3% in July 2025 compared to negative 2.9% in January 2025. So in a period of about 6 months, we were able to reverse the dangerous trend where we were seeing contracting of credit extension to the private sector to now a positive 3.3%. The exchange rate to the US dollar has stabilized, as you know, in the 128 to 130 Kenya shillings range since January 2024. Economic recovery, stability in the exchange rate, and the macroeconomic stability have created confidence and triggered FDI inflows and attracted investors to the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure and a deep sense of responsibility to welcome you all to this landmark credit rating national workshop. So after I've spoken about those positives, which I am sure many of us, these figures are not new to you, then now we have to start a conversation. If ever there was ripe time for this conversation, it is now. Credit ratings, as other speakers who have spoken ahead of me have stated, shapes development finance and is a vital part of the financial development ecosystem. A stronger sovereign rating is a catalytic milestone because it lowers the country's perceived risk profile across international capital markets, directly reducing the cost of borrowing and widening the pool of available financing. This calls for effective engagement with credit rating agencies. However, effective engagement with ratings agencies requires transparent, consistent communication, and strong coordination. Further, rating defense requires a well-prepared narrative that acknowledges risks while demonstrating clear, actionable responses and presenting reforms and policy measures, especially when seeking positive rating adjustments. And this calls for a diverse stakeholder participation, coordination, and proactive engagement with investors. To strengthen the capacity of stakeholders in preparing for sovereign credit rating reviews, it is important for the government and its stakeholders to work as a team. This can be achieved through interactive role-play simulations and expert feedback, reflecting real-world rating agency engagement scenarios designed to mirror typical engagements with rating agencies. This workshop or forum offers that opportunity. And once I finish my official speech, I will make some off-the-cuff remarks where I will demonstrate some of these examples. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this gathering is not a routine meeting. It is a pivotal moment in our national economic journey, a journey that now stands at the threshold of profound change, especially among or coming after the Seville Conference on Development Financing. As you may be aware, in 2014, Kenya attained the status of a lower middle-income country. This transition was a testament to the resilience of our people and our economy, the ambitions of our reforms, and the determination of the Kenyan government to attain the aspirations of the Vision 2030. Yet, ladies and gentlemen, progress brings also with it new realities. And the reality is that the improvement in status gradually phased us out of eligibility for highly concessional borrowing, a financing avenue still available to many low-income countries. This reality emerges at a time when our development financing needs are expanding and the global pool of concessional resources is tightening. Therefore, we must now prepare to compete more strategically on the international capital markets, strengthen domestic resource mobilization, and ensure every shilling delivers the highest value for our citizens. Over the past 5 years, Kenya's revenue to GDP ratio has averaged between 15% and 17%. It actually fell to 13.1% in 2020 due to the COVID-19, before rebounding to approximately 14.4% in 2023. These figures remain below both our medium-term revenue strategy target of 20% and the East Africa Community aspiration of 27% of GDP. Increasing this ratio is not simply a fiscal exercise. It is a national development imperative, and it calls for broadening of our tax base, enhancing compliance, and ensuring a fair, predictable, and growth-friendly tax regime. This is essential if we are to close our fiscal gap without stifling enterprises or overburdening our taxpayers, which is not an option now. I'm sure we are all aware that that is not an option. Ladies and gentlemen, the structure of our external financing has been shifting. Official development assistance, or ODA if you like, peaked at $4.3 billion in 2020, during the pandemic before contracting to $2.65 billion US dollars in 2022 as emergency flows reduced significantly. However, foreign direct investment inflows have remained steady at between 1.4 billion US dollars to 1.6 billion US dollar annually over the last 5 years, which is equivalent to 1 to 1.5% of GDP. So while this places Kenya among the leaders in East Africa, it falls short of our Vision 2030 ambitions. We must therefore intensify efforts to channel more FDI into critical infrastructure, manufacturing, ICT, and green energy, which are enablers for an inclusive transition of a developing country. Kenya's investment needs to achieve Vision 2030 and the medium-term plan, or MTP4, which is the final plan under Vision 2030, running from 2023 to 2027, are estimated at over 25% of GDP annually, while current domestic savings and fiscal allocations fall short, leaving an investment financing gap of over 9% of GDP each year, equivalent to about 10 billion US dollars. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenyan's sovereign credit ratings currently at, B, B minus, and CAA1, negative by S and P, Moody's and Fitch, respectively. This constrained rating profile has led to higher borrowing costs, with yields driven by a perceived elevated country risk premium and credit spread. Debt service as a share of revenues has grown over time, further squeezing fiscal space and threatening to crowd out critical investments in infrastructure, health, education, and climate resilience. However, the recent credit rating upgrade demonstrates the tangible benefits of fair assessments, which by extension translates to lowering borrowing costs. The country can redirect scarce resources from debt servicing into critical priorities such as infrastructure, agriculture, and of course, climate resilience. The upgrade was not just about improved statistics, but also reflected deliberate reforms, notably in the 2025 Finance Act, which enhanced tax compliance and signaled fiscal credibility. These measures strengthened investor confidence and underscored Kenya's commitment to responsible economic management. Ladies and gentlemen, effective engagement with ratings agencies requires, again, I want to repeat, this is where I started, transparent, consistent communication, and strong coordination. Further, rating defense requires a well-prepared narrative that acknowledges acknowledges risks on the one hand, while demonstrating clear, actionable responses and presenting reforms and policy measures, especially when seeking positive rating adjustment. And this calls for diverse stakeholder participation, coordination, and proactive engagement with investors and rating agencies. I am informed that UNDP pioneered the credit rating initiatives in Africa in 2005, enabling at least 18 countries to secure their first sovereign ratings. In this renewed phase, Kenya is a focus country for 2025, having already participated in specialized engagements in Addis Ababa and Cape Town. Therefore, this workshop will provide a platform for stakeholder engagement to deepen our collective understanding of credit rating methodologies and expectations from rating agencies, which Honorable Nderitu Mureithi spoke about, facilitate the formulation of a national multi-agency technical working committee, and I want to agree that should be the outcome of this meeting, to coordinate our national approach and build towards the ultimate goal, lower costs, higher impact borrowing for Kenya's transformative development. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I want to repeat, this is not a theoretical discourse. This is not an academic exercise. Every basis point we save in borrowing costs translates into classrooms built, translates in hostels equipped, roads completed, and livelihoods improved. As such, our challenges are threefold. One, strengthen domestic revenue mobilization to reduce fiscal vulnerability. Two, engage proactively and strategically with credit rating agencies to secure, what do we intend to secure? Fair, evidence-based assessments, and mobilize diversified financing, including innovative instruments such as green bonds and SDG-linked bonds. So on behalf of the government of Kenya, I extend my deepest gratitude to UNDP, the government of Japan, Africatalist, APRM, and all our partners for making this workshop possible. Before I conclude, allow me also to delve on a few issues that have been raised. And first, you are going to engage here for a number of days. So what is the objective? I think we need a candid conversation about credit rating, especially on the African sovereigns, the African countries. I also fall in this category of people who believe that a lot of times we are probably not properly understood. And I think it is our duty to make sure that we are understood. Our economies are understood. We need clear comparisons. We need to be clear why, for example, and as Honorable Nderitu Muriithi puts it, and I want to agree, that why is it that Kenya can still not have investment grade rating? And we know there are others who probably, where are the statistics? Where are the macros? Where is the comparison? And not to dispute the rating of some of these countries which have jumped to that category. For example, I will just give you some examples here. We all know Botswana. We have heard about Mauritius. Many of us have visited there. We know Morocco. These three countries have been rated as investment grade. And that comes with benefits. First, attracts investment. Two, it also lowers the cost of borrowing. And access to the international financial markets is made easy. But we would not have a problem if the statistics were materially different from Kenya. But the statistics don't speak to that. For example, what is the GDP of Botswana? In US dollar terms, 20 billion. Mauritius is 16 billion. Morocco is 154 billion. But Kenya is 124 billion. So that is one statistic. What is debt to GDP ratio of these countries? Botswana reports 28%. Mauritius reports 87% to GDP. Morocco, it is 70% to GDP. Kenya is 65.5% to GDP. Again, you can see the comparison. What is the economic growth of these countries, the average economic growth? Botswana, 1%. Mauritius, 4.7%. Morocco, 3.3%. Kenya is 4.7%. Again, Kenya can only compare with Mauritius in that. The rest are below. Inflation. The inflation of Botswana is 6.7%. Mauritius, 5.8%. Morocco is 4.1%. Kenya is 5.2% average inflation. Right now, it's even below that. Fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit for Botswana is 6.7%. That's the last year. Mauritius, 5.8%. Morocco, 4.1%. and Kenya was 5.2%. FDI inflows, we were not able to get figures from Botswana, but for Mauritius it's 0.5 billion US dollars, 1.64 for Morocco, and 1.5 for Kenya. The forex reserves is 4.4 billion for Botswana, 12.36 billion for Mauritius, Morocco is 37 billion, Kenya is 9.2 billion. Now, what I'm saying is look at those statistics and tell me why these three countries can all fall under investment grade rating category and Kenya is not. What is it that we are not putting across strongly to improve the credit rating of Kenya? Sometimes we feel that there is unfairness. For example, when there are riots in France, people are all over the streets. We see Capitol Hill attacked in the US, almost killing the speaker. We see military vehicles moving in towns in the US. That is actually democracy. That is the clear demonstration of democracy. In Kenya, you have demonstrations on 7th of July, and the following day, everybody is back to work. Everybody is walking to the office. The only thing that you can feel in the street is the smell of tear gas, and that is chaos, and this country is collapsing. And that is a risk that must be built in our credit rating to downgrade us because we are not able to demonstrate that going forward, we are going to be able to service our debts. That's how we have been rated all the time. And I keep on telling people that Kenya's democracy is unique. In fact, there is no comparison in Africa, even the world. Kenya is the only country where people can fight today like they are killing each other, and tomorrow they are back in the offices and laughing at each other. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. Tell me, show me, demonstrate just one country. Why can't that be factored in our strength as a resilient nation, which can be able to sustain? Because it is about, you need to demonstrate the going concern as an accountant. That a country must demonstrate that it is a going concern. I think Kenya has proved beyond reasonable doubt that it is probably the only country in the world which can assure going concern concepts in a long period of time. Because we have come out of worse situations. For example, let me make this, it is not a joke, it is a serious thing, because politics inbuilds in economy. Politics gets integrated into even the credit rating. When, for example, and people know that a serious political force, that a serious political leader is now supporting the government of the day, that should improve our credit rating. Because who doesn't know that if Raila decides today that I am not in this broad-based government, then there would be chaos in the country. We would shut our economy for months. And when now he supports the government, you don't see that as a lesser political risk to be included in our credit rating. What I'm speaking to may look or sound ridiculous, but I'm just saying that we need to agree that our reality is not being sold out properly. And I want to plead with this conference to look at the unique situation of Kenya and see how then we can get into an engagement on credit rating, because there is something not working right. That is why you find our DSA calculation by IMF and the rest is also having challenges. Not properly done, in my view. But that is another engagement. Let me conclude. We have implemented, or we have started implementing a number of reforms, which in my view should go into improving our standing as a country and our credit rating in general. First, and this has been spoken to here, domestic resource mobilization. Kenya even attempted in 1 year to increase revenue, ordinary revenue, by 30% in 1 single year. In fact, I say that this was actually to a large extent carelessness. You can't afford that. You can't achieve that. You cannot increase revenue by 2% of GDP in 1 financial year. It would cause civil unrest. And that is why we almost had a near collapse of the country last year. But we attempted it, and we made some progress in terms of revenue mobilization. Right now, we are on a serious reform agenda under expenditure rationalization. If you listen to government officers, their view about Treasury single account, it has put closed stops. Previously, what government officers used to do, accounting officers, they request for money from the Treasury, indicate where they want to apply the money. Once they receive the money, they put the money in, the receipts into current accounts and start applying it anyhow again. That is now stopped. If you requisition money based on certain invoices, you must pay those invoices. And it has closed tabs. I wish I could tell you what I'm seeing in the CRF accounts of counties. But let me not open a political debate. We have made progress on integration of our payrolls with the resistance, again, largely from county executives, but I have insisted everyone else must get into the system. We must integrate the payroll. We must eliminate the so-called ghost workers. We must eliminate parallel payroll systems. Asset management is going under a lot of reforms. You all know what we are doing with the state-owned enterprises. A lot of reforms. And finally, EGP, electronic procurement system, is a major reform. And I have decided that this is one area that I'm going to work hard to push so that it is accepted. Because I know what it is going to do in this country in terms of revolutionizing expenditure, in terms of rationalizing expenditure. My second last comment is this, that as we deal with that, the next question that I ask even our development partners, that I ask IMF, that I now want to ask the credit rating agencies, is the problem in Kenya a solvency problem? Are we dealing with a solvency question? Or we are dealing with a liquidity question? We are obviously dealing with a liquidity question, not solvency question. Look at the numbers. Look at the statistics. Look at the projection. There is no doubt that Kenya is in a good position as a sovereign state in terms of solvency. What we are dealing with is a short term. Between now and 2032, 2034, the question of debt servicing. And so if the sovereign demonstrates that we can liability manage, that now the Eurobond of 2027 is no longer a headache. It was 900 million. What did we do? We reduced it to about 300 million by liability managing it. And then the 300 million, we have been paying 108 every year. We paid in May. We are paying May next year another 108. And then clearing that loan in 2027, 108. The 2028 Eurobond of $1 billion US dollars, again, was our target for last week's issuance, to manage it, to smoothen our debt maturity. And if that cannot be hailed as a positive step, then I don't know what can be hailed as a positive step. And my last comment is on what has been spoken a lot about on pending bills, that is one of the reasons why sometimes we get lower credit rating, because we have huge amounts of pending bills. The government took a bold step and said, okay, fine, let us determine what exactly is our pending bills. And we formed a committee. Out of all the figures that were being quoted in 600 billion, 900 billion, it's turning out that our pending bills, verified pending bills, is below 300 billion. And a third of that is already settled under the road sector. So we are remaining with the 2/3, about 200 billion shillings max. And the cabinet is looking at ways and means of making sure that we settle the pending bill, the historical pending bill, some dating back to 2005. If that cannot lead to a positive credit rating, then I don't know then what this sovereign can do to make a case for a stronger credit rating. And that we have done through innovative means, innovative ways, securitization. And a lot of people have been talking negative about securitization. Let me just give you 2 examples. I know I've spoken longer than I should, but let me just come to a conclusion. If anything, I think I was the one to make a case, a stronger case. And since I will not be here with you, I want you to get what, I don't know whether it is recorded, Marianne. Is it recorded so that you could play what I was saying after we'll have left, so that this matter is actually canvassed objectively and transparently? We are not calling for any favor here. What we are calling for is fairness. Treat us fairly. If we have failed in certain aspects, tell us so that we correct. Because what we want is to improve an economy for our people. We want an economy which Kenyans will walk in the streets and they are happy. Though I was talking about securitization. Let me give you 2 examples. We have a fund here we call Road Maintenance Levy Fund. We put money in that fund every year. But the truth of the matter is that that money is not spent, utilized prudently. There is no value for money. It is distributed to constituencies to put maram roads on the roads, and immediately rains comes, they are swept away, and then you get back to where you are. And yet you have contractors who have stopped work. Marams are piling up on the roads, broken equipment everywhere, causing a problem. Economy cannot grow. So we decided to use this, especially the additional money. There was the 18 shillings. But now we were adding another 7 shillings. We said, okay, fine, let's continue using the 18 shillings as it were. But we now use the 7 shillings differently. And that has had serious impact in the economy. Let me tell you what it has done. The construction sector was contracting early this year, 0.7%, moving dangerously, negative 0.7%. Early this year. The moment we started paying these contractors and they are back on our roads, now construction industry has expanded by 5.7%. Then someone is saying that that is an initiative that we should have not taken. I think you are wrong. And I believe we are right. If you think you are wrong, right, and I'm wrong, or we are wrong as a government, tell us how. Last example on that securitization. The last time we developed a stadium of international standards was 1985. Before the 1987 Fourth All African Games. The last president to do a serious stadium in this country was President Moi. Actually, he's the only one who did 2 international stadiums, 2 stadiums of international standard. Nyayo and Moi Kasarani. He decided to name one Nyayo, and then another one, Moi International. 2, tell me of any other stadium in the country. Nothing. Even though we have been talking negative about how President Moi was terrible, well, I agree there was a lot of questions. But those 2, you cannot take away from him. But we have had sports fund all these years, so many years after In fact, during Moi's time, there was no sports fund. We have not even used that sports fund to develop one stadium. Now in this government, we have done Talanta Stadium using this fund. Because the fund was being misused. You give members, MPs who are members of the sports committee, you give 50 million, go and do some field in your constituency. They go and put some shade, which is used twice a year during August holiday and December holidays. And that is it. That is where we have been applying the sports fund. No impact, no value to the economy. We want to use this money better. Then someone says that is not correct. Ladies and gentlemen, let us be open to serious discussion.
Okay.
Is someone telling me?
Your embassy, sir.
Let me wind up in a minute. You know, I think someone is telling me that I've spoken for too long. You know, sometimes it could not be someone, but oh, they are agreeing, eh? Or maybe, you know, God can speak to you in different ways. But you see, if we have a positive credit rating as a sovereign, that is where I'm now ending. It goes a long way in even making it possible for parastatals to go out there to also fight for good credit rating without now being told that there is the political risk from the sovereign that is lowering your credit rating. So our parastatals can go out and get funding and expand their businesses, and especially commercially viable. And Safaricom, for example, would get fair and favorable rating without any factoring of political risks in the assessment of credit rating. So let me end my engagement. I am sorry if I bored you, but I want to just request that we open ourselves to discussion objectively, transparently, and if there are areas where you feel the sovereign, the government, should take action to improve things, I am ready. I said I didn't come to this office for business as usual. We must disrupt. We must change things. We must do things differently but better. Otherwise, thank you very much for according me this opportunity. Asanteni sana. Mungu awabariki.